Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Why are North American forests so creepy? I've never felt creeped out by hikes or camping trips abroad, but I often get creeped out in the US and Canada. And I think I had a legitimate encounter with a feral man in Tennessee. I guess part of it might be the vastness of the forests and the wilderness, but even so, when you get that feeling, it feels deeper than that. I was camping in the Unica mountain wilderness area, and I had a feeling I was being watched. This was a single night hike, and I was on the verge of turning around because I just started feeling sick. Not as in feeling ill, but I sensed in my stomach something was wrong, like I was being watched. When I went to sleep, I was frozen with fear in my tent, and I heard shuffling outside and just lay there sweating like crazy. I left a pool of sweat even though it wasn't hot out. When I woke up, there were prints all around my tent. They weren't boot prints. They were in the shape of a human, but were flat like somebody was wearing moccasins or something. To this day, I am convinced this was a feral person, which has been known to exist in Appalachia. Anybody else feel way more creeped out in North American forests than when they camp abroad? You'd think it would be the other way around due to familiarity. And have any Euros felt creeped out in North America?
In Canada, yes. The mid and southern US is fine. There is a difference between feeling creeped out because of a moose or bear nearby and feeling creeped out like in your story. The only thing that came close to my Canada experience in Europe was in the Finnish Lapland near the Russian border. This is no man's land. No trails, no humans, only swamps, hills, birch forests, moose and bear. I had not seen another person for 5 or 6 days. It was early in the morning, already light out, and I was sleeping with my head against the inner and outer tent fabric. Suddenly my dream starts to get lucid and I dream/hear someone chanting, repetitive like a shaman. Something is pressed against my neck and I wake up. I don't move. Chanting continues. Eventually he releases my neck from the outside and I hear him walk away. It felt like he marked or blessed me for something good and bad at the same time. I didn't lose the feeling for the rest of the trip, even today maybe.
It's because big scary shit lives in the woods here. The worst thing that EU has to deal with is wolves, which most got hunted out in small relatively bears. Then going over to America you got grizzlies, Kodiak bears, mountain lions, a lot more wolves. Remember that when settlers first came here and started to report back about grizzlies, they actually thought they were making it up and bullshitting. That's how insane the shit was that we had over here was. EU in a woods nature, if you are not stupid, won't screw you too badly. In the West, nature is actively trying to kill you every step of the way. Europe minus Russia and even Scandinavia has 3 or 4 times as many brown bears as the lower 48 of the US and twice as many wolves. Europe also has about twice as many moose as the US as a whole. US farmers and hunters absolutely decimated the populations about 100 years ago, and they are barely recovering. In 3 states they are starting to recover. Unlimited tag hunts have reopened, which will halt and reverse their recovery. The lower 48 of the US does have a lot more game like black bears, coyotes, deer over twice as much, mountain lion, and about the same number of elk-sized game compared with Europe though. Another common misconception is that Europe has less forest. It actually has slightly more total forest than the US as a whole. It's just mostly concentrated in Eastern and Northern Europe and has much less wilderness or continuously unbroken wild areas.
Appalachian anon here. I don't know much about them yet, but I 100% believe that some kind of spirits inhabit North America, and those who were here before us understood them better than we do. There's always the cultural norms argument, but I think there's a reason some of the world's most productive societies developed so many spirits which were haunted by greed. Natives kept the spirits contained. I've been in the woods since I was a kid. I hunt and backpack solo all the time, always walking across the hills. I've seen mysterious noises of metal creaking that very obviously came from a very small area, but where I couldn't find anything to cause them. I heard the noises no matter whether the wind was blowing, time of day, etc. Gives me chills and makes my eyes water to think about it. Rattlesnake coming out of the brush at me in Pennsylvania on a 40-degree, rainy morning. Some wacky shit had already gone down on this trip, so I connected this to it. From what I know, snakes out in open ground in weather like that are not super likely. Getting into my tent and seeing the space between the rainfly and tent covered in bugs, like 50 or 60. Assumed there was some explanation, but this has never happened to me before in decades outdoors and hasn't happened since. The spots where the birds don't sing. Don't be aggressive, don't look back or be afraid. You are a guest. Act like one and you have nothing to fear. Don't trash the woods. I don't ever use drugs and only drink a bit from a flask in the woods. I don't use a flashlight while hiking at night unless I have to, like looking through a bag. Some things are meant to sleep in the dark. The world isn't there to make it your own.
Try walking through the Amazonian jungle. That will put the fear of God in your heart really quick. You have to deal with snakes, poisonous frogs and insects, big cats that will stalk you without being seen, poisonous plants of all kinds, drug smugglers from other countries that will shoot you on sight, natives that probably are not friendly, illegal loggers and miners that maybe will shoot you on sight, military spec ops teams doing God knows what. Everything in the water is dangerous. Noises that make no sense. The sensation of being observed all the time. Holy shit, Brazil. I never want to go back there. Also, there's a ton of slave work in broad daylight in those forgotten cities, and nobody cares. There's a ton of stuff, from finding weird witchcraft rituals in the forest, to seeing the aftermath of illegal miners and loggers killing natives and vice versa. Most regions are very dangerous, but the northeast takes the cake because there's no law since it is so vast and nobody cares anyway. But here's a story about some ritual I witnessed in the middle of the forest. I went to Rio de Janeiro because I'm a European tourist. Mom has some friends there. Went to the waterfalls because beaches are always packed in the summer. Enjoying a still somewhat preserved forest and some cool waterfalls. Water is cold because of the mountains. See some movement up ahead. There's like 30 people in a shallow natural pool. Live chickens, lots of food, and some weird songs. What is all this? Friend explained to me it's some African religion ritual, and they do this to celebrate some African gods or whatever. Shouldn't we GTFO out of here before they use us as a sacrifice? No need. They're cool, and you can watch no problem. Just don't say anything. People all dressed in white. They start dancing, getting in a sort of trance state and acting like they're entities or whatever. Some old dudes started killing chickens left and right. Blood everywhere in the water. Music gets louder, talking gets louder, the dance becomes weirder. They start smoking and drinking in the middle of the blood water. After some time, everything was calm again, people bathing in the now clear water. My Portuguese is non-existent and I was kinda scared some of them were gonna slice my throat. Went home thinking WTF was that. Apparently it's a normal thing in a religion called candomblé. Went home smelling like wet chicken. All this on a Wednesday. There's stuff like this all over the country. And it's not even the worst I saw.
My face when Yooper. Really into Bigfoot and cryptids. Have stalked around the most desolate forest I can find for years with zero odd things ever happening. Fellow out friend came over to my place for the weekend. Proud Bigfoot skeptic and always debated me on the subject. Wakes me up in the middle of the night. He is pale and shaking. WTF bro, you good? Tells me he saw a Bigfoot, and he wants to get out of here. Think he is joking and laugh him off and try and go back to sleep. He starts shaking me, begging me to get up and leave because he doesn't want to walk out alone. Sounds like he is going to cry. Realize he isn't joking, he is a big guy and seasoned outdoorsman who shouldn't fear walking a few miles in the dark. Try and ask him WTF happened, but he is too shook and just begs me to pack up faster. He sets the pace and we basically run out of the forest back to the dirt road my truck was parked at. Throw shit into the bed and jump into the cab. Start up and drive off. Friend doesn't stop looking behind us until we reach the blacktop. Still refuses to talk about it. I'm so unlucky, brothers.
It was the winter of 2020. I was driving north on Highway 21 at approximately 10:10 p.m., just outside of Hillsboro, Missouri, just past Jefferson College. I was just passing the northbound off-ramp from Hayden Road onto northbound Highway 21 at mile marker 169.6. I'm not sure of the day of the week. I work the night shift every weekday and also work the same shift every other weekend, so all of the nights just seem to run together. I just remember it was very cold and the road was deserted. I was the only car in the north or southbound lanes for as far as I could see. This is the same route I have taken to work every night for the past 8+ years, so I know the road very well. The dash of my car showed the ambient temperature was only 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But standing outside it felt even colder. It was clear, with no wind, rain, or snow. It was a clear, bitterly cold night. Just before mile marker 169.6, I noticed a rather tall thin guy standing on the right-hand shoulder of the road under the streetlight. He stood facing me as I headed north. I slowed as I came upon him out of caution, but was not dumb enough to come to a complete stop. He was standing completely still, not walking or moving at all. I have seen other people walking along the side of this highway at night from time to time before, so I did not think too much about seeing someone this night, other than the fact that this night was so bitterly cold. As I approached, he stood completely motionless. He was very poorly dressed for the cold. He was wearing only a dark color faded hoodie and dark colored, faded pants of some sort. I cannot remember if they were jeans or sweatpants. They had no holes or rips in them, but I remember that his whole appearance looked rather shabby. He had his head covered with the hoodie and kept his head pointed down enough so that I could not see his face. I could not see any sign of breath being exhaled into the bitterly cold night air from under his hoodie. This was really creepy. He stood there, completely motionless with his hands hanging to his sides. I remember thinking to myself that if I were out in this kind of cold that was poorly dressed, I would certainly keep myself moving to try to stay warm. But this guy was standing completely motionless, not walking, not swinging his arms or moving his hands or fingers or legs at all. He stood completely still, like a statue. Another very odd thing was that he wore no gloves, so his fingers had to be freezing. He did not have either of his hands in his hoodie pocket or his pant pockets for warmth. The hoodie seemed to fit his frame proportionally well, except the sleeves were too short. His arms were way too long for the sleeves. I could see maybe 3 to 3.5 inches of the bare forearm from the bottom of his hoodie cuff to the top of his hand, which looked odd. Everything else seemed to fit okay, but his arms were way too long for the sleeves. This guy was tall. Compared to the mile marker sign which was behind him, I would say that he had to stand 6'9" tall or more. As I slowly drove past him and watched him, it became one of those moments when time seemed to slow down. It was as if it all happened in slow motion. I can remember a lot of detail and how he just continued to stand there in the cold completely motionless as I drove past him, never turning his head or moving any part of his body in any way. After I passed him, I could still see him in my rearview mirror standing there on the shoulder of the highway, in the same spot, illuminated by the street light above. He still remained there completely motionless, like a statue, not moving at all, his hands still hanging at his sides, his body completely motionless, not even a finger moved. I kept glancing into my rearview mirror to take another look at him until I rounded the corner and finally lost sight of him. I never saw him move the entire time. I got this rather ominous, dark, foreboding feeling as I passed him. If what I saw were some kind of ghost or demon or specter or whatever you want to call it, it certainly was not ghostly in appearance at all and looked as solid and as real as you or me. I still do not know what it is that I saw that night. But I hope I never see it again. It really freaked me out.
Among the passengers the other night bound for New York from the west on the Day Express was a wild man who occupied a seat in smoking car number 153. He was accompanied by James Harvey and Raymond Boyd, his captors, both of whom belong in Paducah, Kentucky. They had 3 second-class tickets to New York, which privileged them with 3 seats in the smoking car of any first-class train. When the Day Express arrived at the Broad Street station at 8 o'clock, James Harvey ran down the platform into the restaurant and purchased a box of sardines and some sandwiches for the wild man's supper. His companion remained in charge of the wild man. The wild man was dressed in a citizen's dress and wore big cloth shoes. His hair reaches nearly to his waist and falls over his shoulders, completely covering his back. His beard is long and thick, while his eyebrows are much heavier than those of an ordinary human being. There is nothing imbecilic in the wild man's manners or actions. He cannot talk and seldom makes any sound except a low growl. Like a leopard, his actions are as much like those of the hyena of the zoological garden. Raymond Boyd, who seemed to have perfect control over the wild man, said his body is covered with coarse brown hair as thick as the hair on a horse's hide. The palms of his hands looked like the paws of a bear, and his fingernails, which were over an inch long, resembled the claws of an eagle. He was first seen in Paducah County 13 years ago and was known as Mum the Hermit because whenever anyone accosted him all he would say was, "Mum's the word." He lived in an old pine hut in the woods for about 5 years and was seldom seen by anyone. Finally, he abandoned the hut and took up his abode in a cave under a ledge of rocks known as Lizard Rock. A little over 6 years ago, 2 or 3 citizens of Paducah County, while out hunting, saw him running into his cave without a stitch of clothing on him. 3 years ago it was discovered that a thick coat of hair had grown all over his body. Boyd and Harvey built a man-trap for him and it took over 3 days before he entered it. He was not afraid of any bird or beast of prey but ran terrified away from any human being who approached him. It took 2 days to accustom the man-beast to their presence. The tinkle of a small dinner bell they used had great influence over him. He watched the bell intently but would not touch it. Some time ago a farmer missed a calf and 2 sheep which had strayed off. They were tracked to Mum's cave here. All trace of them was lost and it was supposed that he devoured them in his cave which he had occupied for the last 7 or 8 years. Boyd and Harvey found the skeletons of small animals and the skins of over 50 snakes. Some of the skins belonged to the most venomous species of reptiles. The floor of the cave was alive with red and green lizards and hundreds of toads hopped about. The wild man ate the box of sardines voraciously and the 2 sandwiches which were handed him were greedily pulled apart. He ate the ham and threw the bread away. Whenever a train passed on the opposite track he crouched down in the corner of the seat terror-stricken. After the train passed he would put his hand to his ear and listen with a look of animal cunning stealing out of his restless eyes like a panther about to pounce on its prey. Every time the engineer blew the whistle the wild man would grab the back of the seat in front of him with both hands and hold on until the whistle ceased blowing. Boyd had a little tin music box which he manipulated with a crank. The tune that it played was "Empty is the Cradle," and it was ground again and again to the great satisfaction of the ex-hermit who sat and looked at it silently but would not touch it. When conductor Harry Smith took out his glistening nickel-plated punch to cancel the tickets the wild man watched the punch intently until he heard it snap. Then he got down in the corner of the car and sat fairly shivering with fear and set up a low howl supposing evidently that conductor Smith was about to wing him. Boyd and Harvey said that there was a story to the effect that the wild man had originally come from North Carolina and that during the war he had been a sharpshooter on Bald Mountain and that shortly after the war he had murdered a whole family of settlers in the mountain and left. Both Boyd and Harvey appear like shrewd fellows and they expect to make a fortune out of their prize. Their great anxiety and fear is that the authorities will interfere with them and claim that the man is simply a lunatic and place him in some institution. They had the snake skins in a box in a baggage cart together with some other curiosities found in the cave. Boyd said that the wild man will not touch anything but fruit and meat which he eats ravenously and much the same as wild beasts. Cigar smoke bothered him a good deal and he kept driving it away from him with his clawed hands. When the train arrived in Jersey City the men took a carriage and said they were going to take the New Haven night boat and avoid a day crowd.
I have seen a Bigfoot variation when hiking in Tennessee, matches identically the local legend of the Tennesse Wildman, which I did not know about until after the encounter. There was kind of a rocky gorge along this trail as I was hiking with light rain at sunset. In the gorge were big rocks and it was dark with enough room for something to be behind it. I heard the guttural ape sounds walking past it, almost like a pig-frog call but different. I was spooked as the vibe changed and the forest went quiet. After passing the gorge I decided to turn around because I wanted to go back and was thoroughly freaked out about something being near me. As I walked past the gorge again, behind one of the rocks I saw something alive and pale white. I didn't know what it was so I kept walking closer looking at it until I made out its face. Chills went down my spine as I saw this thing squatted behind one of the rocks with pale skin and a red-brown mane surrounding its head. It had a wide face and nose and it was looking at me with its head tilted downward, black beady eyes and an evil smile. I immediately sprinted back to the trailhead and drove away. I never believed in Bigfoot until that, but let me tell you, the moment you lock eyes with this thing you know it's something not human with great intelligence and sentience looking back at you. It didn't fit the traditional Bigfoot description but fits the Tennesse Wildman description, so I don't know if this thing is like some inbred human or like a diff type of Bigfoot, but whatever it is, it's freaky and it's real.
More of a general greentext than specifically cryptid, but whatever. I got followed by someone or something about 5 years ago hiking in the mountains east of San Diego. Haven't been outdoors in a bit and work's pissing me off. Check the weather report and see it'll be a clear night with a full moon. Remembered the full moon hikes at Camp Matagway and decided to go on one. Illegally CC my Glock 19 because who's going to check? The statute of limitations is 3 years. Get a few miles out before the sun starts to set. Enjoy the breeze, smoke my pipe for a bit. Tobacco, not weed. Get moving once the sun's down. Moon starts rising shortly after sunset. Find some toads and scorpions as I'm hiking. Haha, toad go hop. As I'm rounding a corner, see something jump off the trail into the bushes. Oh, hope that was a deer. Keep moving forward, shine the flashlight where the thing jumped off. Me. Oh shit, a mountain lion. The mountain lion. Oh shit, a human. Kitty runs off up a hill. Carry on forward on the current trail I'm on as it's a loop, and it'd be a further hike back to my car if I turned around. No more signs of Kitty, but see a herd of deer. They don't run off when I walk by, probably 25 yards or so. Just kind of all watch me with their spooky eye shine reflecting off my light beam. Continue on, enter a big meadow. Moon's out and the whole place is lit up, lights shining off the lake. It's a biggish pond, really, in the middle of the meadow. So bright I don't need my flashlight. Enjoying the hike now, I always enjoy being in the moonlight, and the weather was perfect. Suddenly hear a splash from up a good distance ahead. See what looks sort of like a person stand up from the edge of the pond and book it across the trail into the trees. Get my flashlight out and try to shine it up into the trees. Can't see shit but keep moving. Start hearing bits of rustling in the brush behind me as I move down the trail. When I turn around to check, I can't really see anything. Wind is still blowing bushes around a bit, so it's hard to tell if they're being moved by something or just swaying in the wind. Continue on, somewhat unnerved. More rustling. I definitely catch a moment of movement when I check. Start moving faster. Flashlight's switched on now and my other hand's on my pistol. Hear a big snap and a grunt from much closer behind me. When I look, see something pale drop behind a bush like a whack-a-mole. It's far enough away and my flashlight's shitty enough that I can only vaguely see the bush and surrounding area. Pull my gun out and stare at the bush for what felt like 5 minutes straight, though probably more like 30 seconds. Nothing happens, but this is no longer pod racing. In my best diaphragm voice, I yell, "Bro, quit following me or you're gonna get glocked, dude." Immediately realize how dumb that sounded. But I'm spooked. Nothing happens. Back away further down the trail. Probably backpedal a good 50 yards before the trail gets too rough to safely move backwards. Still haven't seen anything move from the bush, so I quickly move on, now about a quarter mile down the trail. Hear what sounds like somebody doing a combination of screaming and puking back in trees. But the trails cross the meadow at this point, so they'd need to cross into the open to follow me further. A few minutes pass, and I think I see something emerge from the trees. It's out of flashlight range, but instead of following me, it moves quickly across the trail to the pond. Hear a big splash, like the sound of a fat dude doing a belly flop. Nope out and book it down the trail as fast as I can go. Don't hear any more noises following me, but don't stop to listen. Make it to my car. No other cars parked in the area. Flee back home. I'm guessing it was either a schizoing or someone tripping far too many balls. Spooked the shit out of me regardless.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.